Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here, and today's video is a chip strategy video for the rest of the season. Now, ever since Double Game Week 34 was announced on Friday, some of us have started to reconsider our chip strategies, namely whether we should free hit in 32 or free hit in 34 instead, or whether we should bench boost in 29 or bench boost in 34 instead. Right, so there are a couple of things that I will cover in this video aside from these big topics such as chip strategies for those of you guys who still have most of your chips intact. So hopefully you guys do enjoy today's video, this chip strategy guide. If you do enjoy it, please give it a like and also subscribe as well if you are new around here. Now, as you guys can see just above me, before we jump into the video, I have a season target of 5,000 subscribers. Now, it may be a little bit of a stretch, but I can dream and we can try to hit 5,000 subscribers. So we're gonna go for it. If you guys have been watching my videos all this while, but you haven't subscribed yet, it just takes a second or two. The button is down below. Just help me out and click subscribe to the channel. And for those of you guys who are new as well, why not, right? Just hit subscribe and you'll see more of my content on your home page. Now, let's get on with the video, and we're going to discuss free hit 32 versus free hit 34 first before we jump into the other chips. Now, the main thing about a free hit 32 that a lot of us, such as myself, right, am favoring at this point in time, right, is that there are quite a number of advantages as well. Now, that's not to say that free hit 34 does not have its benefits. We will touch on them later on, but currently I think for my team, I do prefer a free hit 32 strategy, and I'll cover the reasons why now. Right, so now in game week 29, Brighton, Manchester United, they do have really good fixtures. Now, most of us would already probably be tripled up on Brighton, so no real issues there. But for Manchester United players, I would think that most of us only have Rashford at this point in time. So let's say we want to bring in a Luke Shaw, maybe Bruno Fernandes, right? Then come game week 32, we may be in trouble because Brighton and Manchester United both blank. So if we do have that free hit 32 strategy in place, we don't need to worry about them blanking. We can just focus on bringing them in now for their good fixtures, as well as keep them for the rest of the season, because essentially Brighton and Manchester United players are all players that we can keep for the rest of the season, looking at their fixture schedule and how many rescheduled games that they have moving forward as well. Right, so that's one of the big advantages of a free hit 32. Now, moving on to the next point, it is selling Arsenal assets. Now, this may ring some alarm bells for those of you guys who do like your Arsenal assets and you think you want to keep them, right? But if you take a look at their fixtures from game week 30 to 36, they aren't actually really good fixtures at all, right? So aside from that game week 29 fixture now where they play Leeds at home, right, 30 to 36 would probably be quite tough for Arsenal. Now, some of us would probably be tripled up on them, maybe a defender, Gabriel or Zinchenko, and then you probably have Martinelli or Odegaard plus a Saka. Alright, so you may choose to keep Saka, right? But I think it could be time to sell one of those Arsenal defenders and possibly that second midfielder other than Saka as well, right? So by selling Arsenal assets, you kind of put yourself in a situation where you won't have them for game week 32 essentially, right? Because let's say you keep Saka now, right? You only have one Arsenal asset for game week 32 where they play Southampton at home, and that is where your free hit comes in, right? You want to sell them now because they don't have good fixtures from 30 to 36, but only in game week 32 they do have a great fixture, Southampton at home. And that is where, using that free hit chip, we can bring back our three ideal Arsenal players back into our teams again and target that Southampton at home fixture in game week 32. Now, aside from that, Liverpool assets as well. I would assume that most of us at this point in time don't really have a lot of Liverpool assets in our teams. So bringing in triple Liverpool for their game week 32 fixture against Nottingham Forest at Anfield, I think that is also quite a big advantage of that free hit 32. So moving on to the last point, aside from focusing on when we actually use our free hit, I think what's more important as well is how our teams would look like, or what our teams would revert back to after the free hit chip. So essentially, by using the free hit in game week 32, we have to use free transfers to build a good double game week team for game week 34, and that will be our original team, right? Not our free hit team. And essentially what I mean to say is that by having a good double game week 34 team that is our original team, we will have the advantage of keeping our Manchester United, Brighton, Liverpool and Manchester City assets all the way for the rest of the season. And the reason why this is an advantage is because all 4 of these teams have really good fixtures until the rest of the season. So essentially, by free hitting in 32, we kind of force ourselves to have a good team that is our original team, as opposed to a free hit 34, right, where we essentially build a great team for Game Week 34, right, but essentially reverting back to our original team, which may not be that good because we probably won't have as many Manchester United, Brighton, Liverpool, Man City assets, and these are the players, or these are the teams that we want to target for the rest of the season, right? So that's kind of one of the major disadvantages of a free hit 34. But let's talk a little bit about the advantages now, because I'm sure there are a couple of you guys who are considering the free hit 34 and are quite strong on that as well, right? So let's cover that now. And basically, a free hit 34 will allow you to fully attack double Game Week 34. I think this is the most obvious advantage here, and that's because triple Man City and triple Liverpool will be hard to get to, right? If you count the number of transfers we have from now in Game Week 29 all the way up till Game Week 34, right, it's not a lot of transfers considering that we want to start loading up on Manchester United assets. If you aren't tripled up on Brighton, that's also an additional transfer you have to use there. And then thereafter, you have to start focusing on bringing Liverpool and Man City assets back again. And those who sold Haaland, you probably have 0 Man City assets as well. So there aren't a lot of transfers to bring in triple Liverpool, triple Man City, who have great double gimmick fixtures in 34. And that's essentially where a big advantage of free hitting in 34 comes in. Now, aside from that as well, there are other advantages of a free hit 34, and that is keeping your Arsenal assets. If you are on a free hit 34 strategy, you will have to keep in mind that blank Game Week 32 needs to be navigated, right? And you would therefore have to keep your Arsenal assets because they play Southampton at home, and that's when they would come in handy for you as well. So those of you who really like your Arsenal assets, and are thinking that they only have the Premier League left for Arsenal to focus on, right? Essentially, they're out of Europe, they're out of the domestic cups as well. With only the Premier League to focus on, you may kind of favor that Arsenal performs well, and that's kind of a good reason for you to keep your Arsenal assets. Then a free hit 34 strategy kind of suits your gut feel as well. Right now, aside from that, you will also be able to lose Liverpool assets after double Game Week 34. Now, as much as I think that their fixtures are good, I know some of you guys don't really trust Liverpool assets, right? You think that they won't be able to mount a comeback for the rest of the season. So essentially, for those of you who don't trust them enough, you essentially bring them in for that double Game Week 34 fixture where they have a great double game week both at home, Tottenham and Fulham. You essentially can lose them after that. So no real disadvantage for you there if you don't really want to keep your Liverpool assets. Now, lastly, another good reason why a free hit 34 could make sense for some people is that blank Game Week 32 is not as difficult to navigate anymore. Now, a lot of us actually thought that blank Game Week 32 would be quite difficult to navigate, but I think for those of you guys with 0 Man City players, if you've already sold Haaland, you have none, right? And then you probably only have Kepa, right? Let's say you didn't bring Ben Chilwell in last week, you only have 1 Chelsea asset. And then let's say you only have Rashford as well, that's your 1 Manchester United asset. And then 2 Brighton players, let's say you aren't tripled up on them yet. If you have this kind of a template for your team, right? 0 Man City, 1 Chelsea, 1 Manchester United, and 2 Brighton. That's essentially 4 players that you have, right? That essentially won't have a fixture in Game Week 32. And basically what it allows you to do is that you only need 1 transfer to bring that figure down to 3, and you can chuck all your players on the bench. And essentially blank Game Week 32 is easily, can be navigated with just free transfers for your team. Right, so those of you in this situation, you could be thinking to yourselves, maybe a blank Game Week 32 free hit may not be necessary, and I completely appreciate that as well. Right, and that's where a free hit 34 could come in handy for you as well. Right, so hopefully this comparison of a free hit 32 versus a free hit 34 strategy helps you guys kind of put into perspective whether a free hit 32 or a free hit 34 is better for your team. So now let's move on to the bench boost chip. So moving on to the bench boost chip, I think it's pretty clear and obvious that most of us are either considering a bench boost in Game Week 29 or a bench boost in Game Week 34, where the doubles have just been announced. So I think the most general strategy or the general advice that I have for you guys considering whether you should bench boost in Game Week 29 or 34 is to do your transfers up till 24, right? And essentially compare what your bench looks like then, right? I focus on the word here bench, right? Because you will have to set your 11, and what matters is those 4 players on the bench right now, right? Because essentially we are focusing and comparing the strength of your bench boost based on how many points you will get on your bench, right? So do your transfers all the way up till game week 34 and look at who is on your bench, and then compare it to now in game week 29 with your transfers made, and take a look at which bench you think will score more points, right? So if you are on a game week 29 bench boost strategy originally, right? Maybe you wildcarded in game week 26 or 27, right? Then obviously I think you may find yourself in a situation like myself where I think my team will be better off bench boosting in 29 instead of bench boosting in 34. Now, bearing in mind in game week 34, bigger teams double, and that's Liverpool, Manchester United, Man City as well. And these are teams where their players are slightly more expensive. So what that would mean is that more money would be focused on our starting 11 players, right? Because essentially those Manchester United, Man City, Liverpool assets would be players on our starting 11, right? And essentially the budget left for the bench won't be as much, right, as a game week 29 bench boost. So essentially you will have to compare how your bench looks like, as I said just now, and then take a look at which game week you think will score more points, and that's just a general tip, right? So aside from that as well, I think a bench boost 29 or 34 can actually depend on certain players for some of you guys. Now, the players that I'm talking about right now, right, are players like Ward, who has suddenly been dropped for Everson, Sanchez, who has suddenly been dropped for Steele, right, Rashford, who's yellow flagged right now, Haaland, who's also nursing a little bit of a groin injury, then Botman, who's just come back from the Netherlands camp with a bit of an illness as well. So some of you guys find yourself in situations where you will have you find yourself in a situation where you will not have 15 playing players, right? And you may not have enough transfers to navigate that, and then suddenly you are in a situation where you're kind of forced to delay your bench boost, and then maybe a bench boost 34 strategy could work well for you instead, right? So it is of course team dependent, but essentially I feel like if I still had my wild card, so moving on to the next point there, I think a bench boost 34 would actually suit those still with your wildcard, essentially because you can wildcard in game week 33 and set up for bench boost in game week 34, which is kind of the traditional strategy that a lot of FPL managers use, right? So if I still had a wildcard, I think I will be very tempted to save it for game week 33 and then bench boost in 34 instead of using the bench boost now in 29. Right? So that's my thoughts with regards to the wildcard plus bench boost strategy. But as I mentioned just now, I think some teams are just better prepared for a bench boost 29. Similarly to my team, right? I wildcarded in game week 26. I know some of you guys wildcarded in 27 or 28. You probably already had a bench boost 29 strategy in mind, right? So essentially, if you already had the plan to bench boost in 29, it is likely that your team also looks really good for game week 29, and that's when I think it would make more sense for you to do so, right? Aside from that, the advantages of an earlier bench boost is that you can focus on your main 11 players after your bench boost. So essentially, those who are bench boosting in game week 29 do not need to have a solid 15 players after double game week 29. That is clearly fair and obvious because you are no longer bench boosting. You probably only need 1 or 2 playing players on your bench, right? Even your second keeper doesn't need to be a starting keeper if you really need the funds. Essentially, you can channel all the funds into your starting 11, and that's kind of a good advantage because later on, come game week 34, right, a lot of the bigger teams double, teams like Liverpool, Man City, Manchester United, you will need those funds to get those more expensive players, right? So lastly, one last thing I want to cover before we move on to some chip strategies is that essentially when we are talking about a bench boost 29 versus a bench boost 34, right, there are some trade-off and risks of delaying your bench boost. Now, of course, if you are wildcarding, this would be different because you are just essentially picking a great team one game week before, right? So the risk of injuries or suspensions isn't that great. But for those of you guys without your wildcard, right, there will be some trade-offs and risks of delaying your bench boost, and that's because you will have to start using your free transfers now in game week 29, right, to keep building a good 15-man squad, right, instead of channeling all your funds into your 11 players. You will have to focus your free transfers on building a good and strong 15-player squad so that you can bench boost in 34, and that could be difficult. There will be trade-offs that have to be made as well. Now, that's not to say potential injuries that could happen from now in Game Week 29 all the way up till 34, suspensions as well. James Maddison is on 8 yellow cards. Ivan Toney as well. He probably will be banned after Game Week 29, right? So a lot of things can come into play, and then it could make sense for some of you guys to bench boost in 29 instead. So essentially, I tried to cover a very unbiased view here of a bench boost 29 or a bench boost 34. I do want to leave it up to you guys to decide when is the best time to use it for your teams, right? I wouldn't advise a hard bench boost 29 strategy or a hard bench boost 34 strategy because it is very team dependent, right? Take, for example, if some players are injured, as I mentioned just now, you will be forced into it, right? So different strategies would apply to different teams as I would like to caveat in general for this video. But for my own team, I think I will be on a bench boost 29, but that's simply because of the way my team is shaped up. I will cover more in the team selection video, but I hope this section here helped you guys kind of get a clear view on essentially the things that you will have to consider when you are deciding whether you want to bench boost in 29 or bench boost in 34 instead. Right, so let's talk a bit about chip strategies now for those of you guys who still have most of your chips intact. So on to my preferred chip strategies for those of you guys who have a different number of chips left, right? So let's say you have one chip left. We'll focus on the first row here. If you are on a single free hit strategy for the rest of your season, I think using it in a game week 32 free hit would make the most sense, simply because, as I mentioned just now, you can essentially set up for a good double game week 34 team that is your own team and take it through to the rest of the season. So I would say a free hit 32 is what I would do if I only had the free hit chip left. If I was in a situation where I only had my bench boost left, then I think it's really team dependent. As I mentioned, bench boost is up to your own team whether you're shaped up better for a bench boost in 29 or 34. And now, as for the wildcard, this one is also very team dependent, but some of the windows for wildcarding, I would say, is now in Game Week 29 where there's a double right now. And you also can start to kind of plan with one eye on the future game weeks where the double game week 34 fixtures are already announced. So you can start to bring in some players that double now in 29 and also in 34 as well. Right, and then the other windows that you can consider is 31, where you can start building towards a great double game week 34 team, right? 33 as well, just before the double, or in the double itself, in game week 34 itself. That could also play out well for your team. Now, if you had two chips left, right, there are a couple of combinations here. Now, if you had a free hit chip left and a bench boost chip, essentially you're in my situation, right? I'd actually favor the bench boost 29 free hit 32 strategy, and that is because you probably already used your wildcard, right? You used it earlier on, maybe in 26, or maybe earlier on in the season, just after the restart as well, right? Some teams did that. So what I'm saying is that if you've already used your wildcard, you probably already were leading towards a bench boost 29 strategy. So I actually do prefer that for those of you guys who already were leading up to it. And then free hit in 32, where essentially you start building up towards a great double game week 34 team with your free transfers right now. And then thereafter take that through to the rest of the season. Now, if you are on a wildcard plus bench boost strategy, I think a wildcard 33 and a bench boost 34 is what I really favor, simply because the game week 34 fixtures are really plump, right? So I think a bench boost 34 could look really good if we just wildcard one game week before and pick the ideal team for the bench boost in 34. Now, if you are on a free hit plus wildcard situation where you simply have these two chips left, you don't have your bench boost anymore, I think there are a couple of ways you can go around using these chips, right? So one of the ways is wildcarding now in game week 29, or simply delaying it slightly into game week 31, right? But essentially, you will have to free hit in 32 instead, and you can't use it elsewhere, because if you wildcard now in game week 29, you probably will have those Manchester United assets, you probably will have those Brighton assets, and then a free hit 32 would essentially be kind of necessary for your team. Same goes for 31 as well, right? So The other way to go about doing this is you can choose to wildcard in 33 or 34, right, where you essentially set your team up well for that double game week 34, right, and then your free hit is essentially free to use now in game week 29 or in 37, where there is also a mini double game week there later on in the season as well. We could see some rotations, and that's where we can also pick the ideal team for that game week in game week 37. You kind of put yourself in an advantageous situation as well. Right, so if you are on a 3-chip strategy, right, where you simply have all your chips remaining. Now, I haven't covered the triple captainship in this whole video simply because I think it will be slightly too complicated to include the triple captainship, right? But we will focus on the 3 chips that are mentioned here. So the wildcard, free hit, and the bench boost. If you have all 3 of these chips remaining, I think there are 2 clear strategies right now, right? One of it, which is the preferred one for myself, which is option 1, right, is that you would wildcard in 33, bench boost in 34, so the kind of the traditional strategy, and then free hit in 29 now, where you take advantage of the doubles here, or you free hit in 37 instead. Now, the reason why a free hit, a wildcard 33 is good is because you essentially allow yourself to dead end your team into game week 32, right? Where that is a blank game week for 4 teams. So you dead end your team there, wildcard in 33, set up for the bench boost in 34, and your free hit is completely up to you whenever your team needs to take advantage of double game week. So now in 29 if you need to, or 37 where there's a mini double game week as well. Right, so the second option, which I don't prefer as much as the first option, but I think it could be necessary for some of you guys who do need it, is a slightly earlier wildcard. So now in game week 29 or in 31, right? And essentially, as I mentioned, you probably will have to free hit in 32 to get out of that blank game week, and your bench boost would then be up to you, right? Simply whether you want to bench boost now in 29 or bench boost in 34 instead. Right, so these are my preferred strategies for those of you guys who are in different scenarios where you have different chips left, different permutations of those chips as well. Hopefully it helps you guys on your chip strategies, right? But for now, I think I have pretty much covered what I wanted to cover in this video. Let me know if you guys do have other strategies that I haven't considered in this chip strategy slide here that you're using. I'll be interested to know as well. And do let me know as well if you have more questions surrounding chip strategies. Drop the questions in the comments below and I will try to cover them. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, found it useful, the free hit, the bench boost discussions, as well as this slide here. Right, if you did enjoy it, please drop a like on this video and also subscribe. We are trying to hit 5,000 subscribers for this season. So I'll be really happy if you guys could help me out and click that button. Right, but for now, that's it for this video. I hope you guys do enjoy this. I'll see you guys in the next video very soon. Bye-bye.